everyone. My name is Paulina, and today I'm excited to share progress from my research project on socioeconomic and gender-based disparities in online learning. This work is part of the class 6460 at Georgia Tech and reflects insights from both literature and original survey data that I've collected as part of the second milestone. Let's go over just a quick introduction as to what my project really investigates. So this project investigates how household income, access to technology, and gender impact student engagement and performance in digital learning. I'm especially focused on how confidence, study environments, gender, and self-regulation vary across different socioeconomic statuses and their gender groups. In this milestone, I've went ahead and I've cleaned and analyzed the survey data collected from 51 participants and uncovered trends that are hopefully shaping the direction towards the final stage of my research. To ground this work, I drew from several studies. First one being correlate. And within that study, it was found that low SES meaning for the sake of just abbreviation is the socioeconomic status that we are exploring here. So that's what I mean by SES. So correlate found low SES students struggled more with resources and motivation in comparison to students who came from higher SES backgrounds. In the next research, Wu and Sun, they showed that online education can worsen achievement gaps, especially for K through 12 students. And Yen noted that women tend to show stronger self-regulation within online learning settings. Together, really, these main three findings laid the foundation for my initial research framework within the beginning of the project and really emphasizes the need to look more into the intersectional impacts and aspects of online education. So hence why I'm exploring more of the factor of not only SES, but as well as how SES and along with gender of students impacts their academic achievements and performance. In the next slide, we also talk about a couple more research work that I've interacted with and that has inspired my work for this project. So another one is mainly the Jewald and Mathabi. That one was actually a very interesting read, but to summarize it found that women globally have less internet access than their male counterparts, so we can only imagine really how that impacts their online learning performances and as well as just resources availability compared to, I guess, globally, their male counterparts who would have more of that access available to them. And then finally, this last paper, Howard and Moose. And in that paper, they've emphasized gaps in digital efficacy across gender and SES. So that paper really was my, I'd say, the most closely related and inspiring one for the work that I was doing, since I'm relating those two categories together. And insights from all these papers, but specifically from Howard and Moose, really helped me frame the survey questions that I've created and refine my data analysis of the response based on the responses that I've collected. So before we kind of dive into just some of the bar charts that you'll get to see, really the findings that I've found so far, even just from the initial glance that I've collected from the survey responses, and then once I actually was able to label them out in Jupyter Notebook, really what kind of the first findings that I've found is that lower income students often do face more tech issues and lack quiet, steady spaces in comparison to the students who come from higher income brackets, and hence do have the availability of being able to find quiet, steady spaces and face less technical difficulties. Another one is female students reported better online performance, higher discussion engagement, as well as being able to complete their assignments in a timely manner. But again, those questions were really more of on a free response basis, so there's no transcript to really go off of making that documented reference as to whether or not they were able to perform on time and well, but that's just based on, again, the responses that I've collected from Georgia Tech students who've responded to my survey. Another one is that the platform confidence, so students being comfortable with accessing online education through an online platform, strongly correlated with their academic successes. So those students who responded with having a strong confidence in being able to access and navigate online learning platforms tend to have showed a stronger reported academic success within those settings. And then finally, what was interesting is that those students who identified as non-binary students reported more polarized outcomes. So either they reported having very high engagement or very low engagement with online learning platforms. So there was no really one medium. It was more on the two extremities. So this really kind of highlights the need for potentially more inclusive research. And then the surprising trend as well, another one on that, is that low SES female students sometimes outperformed their male peers, suggesting that gender may actually mediate socioeconomic status disadvantages in online learnings. But again, these are just several of the findings that I've made, collected from a sample of 51 participants. So really, I think if the survey responses either continues to grow, or we even collect this from a larger campus, or potentially not just what we're assuming to be college level to adult students, maybe even K through 12 would be interesting to look at that. And then this just dives into that bar chart that I was talking about. So this basically shows students reporting, how do they compare their comfort level with online education versus in-person performance by gender. So you can see that the green is talking about non-binary, prefer not to say, red is for male, and purple is for female. Then I broke this down a little bit further. I did ask the question of household income. I started below 30,000, above 100,000, and then I listed out ranges as well as to where they fall under that bracket. And these are the results for that. So this is all color coordinated based on income or reported household income. Finally, to even dive it a little bit further, I tried to color coordinate this based on not only gender, but as well as gender specific, with specifically their household income as well. And as we can see, at least with the data that was collected from those 51 participants, males who tend to have a household income above 100,000 tend to be very, very comfortable with online, both very comfortable and somewhat comfortable with online learning platforms. And then when you get more down specifically towards the other genders, female, like this is where it gets, I wouldn't say a little bit complicated, but it is interesting to try and color coordinate this based on gender and income levels, since really my my research really is going into more of the how is both income level and gender impacting performance in online education. So I think this is I'd say my strongest and most favorite graph bar chart that I've made so far, in really being able to express this. So it's been interesting to see so far. Some of the challenges that I've come across, and I think I've also touched this a little bit earlier on and during my explanation of the data that was collected. So some of the challenges that I'm sensing is that my sample did lean toward higher education and tech accessible populations. Hence, the survey was posted on peer survey website that is run through Georgia Tech, which basically guarantees that the only students or participants that are able to respond to the survey are Georgia Tech students, or those with the Georgia Tech email. So that narrows down my collection to, again, higher education and tech accessible populations. Another challenge was that some participants, and this is the part that I was afraid of, some participants did skip the income related questions. Not a lot, a few, thankfully, but again, that I know that question tends to be uncomfortable for many, but in relation to my research, it was a relatively important question to answer. So even for the few that weren't able to respond, the data still was able to give a accurate representation, or a large enough collection of the survey responders towards that income question was able to give a more accurate depiction of what the the relation between income, household income, and academic success. And then I would say that another trend that potential challenge and trend that I've seen is that it would be due to the questions that are more uncomfortable, as mentioned, that some people weren't comfortable with answering the income related questions. It is difficult to understand as to how more deeply can you further explore gender and SES intersections when these are the kind of questions that, yes, they are uncomfortable and some participants may not be comfortable in answering them, but without that answering, how can you make that or deeply go into that relationship between gender and SES intersections? So that was what I found, is that really, so far, the survey results that I've collected came from a tech accessible and higher education population, and as well as some of the main question of household income. Even though I got enough responses to kind of mediate that, it is still a question which did get some skipped responses in, and ultimately I think is also a major factor, where another major factor in all this is that it's all a self-reported question, so there's no real there's no real confirmation as to whether or not what they are self-reporting is in fact to be true, which I think then crosses over to certain, processing, personal information, liability, that sort of thing. So if this study were to go even further, or how it has been reported in other research studies that I've seen, they've collected, they've been able to collect income level based on certain zip codes of areas, and like obtain the median household income in that area before conducting studies, or research surveys within that area. So that's another kind of workaround that you can do, as opposed to having like a self-reported question, is just look at the current data that is accessible online, and then prior to while you're conducting that research, you don't necessarily have to go into the median household income, since you already have that information ahead of time, and participants can just focus on answering questions on their students' performances versus also how much do you make. And then I know my previous comments kind of spilled over into future adjustments, but really I think basically based on the feedback that I received, and just kind of moving forward with what I've currently have, I would go ahead and I think just create more visuals, and potentially this thing called a heat map, which is something that is you can do over Jupyter Notebook, and I think that would be more helpful in replacing some of those like raw bar charts or raw tables that I've collected through the like CSV file, to provide just a better and more, I'd say, interactive visualization, because again I am comparing factors such as gender and SES. So I think maybe potentially having a little bit more of a visual breakdown, so it's not as convoluted and not as messy visually, and that you could actually be able to see a clear trend. And the next steps is, besides those visuals, I did start a little bit on more additional analysis. So some chi-square as well as some regression testing, which I think will just really help kind of wrap the significance of STS and gender on academic performance more smoothly, and actually provide, I'd say, a more quantitative, like hard quantitative analysis in all this. As well as, I think another thing would be to further cross-examine those factors, not only gender and SES, but as we mentioned even earlier on, is internet access, study space. Basically, what current resources do they have available, and are those resources providing certain students more of an advantage for performing well in an online platform versus those who don't start off with those resources. And then next steps is also policy recommendations. So start drafting towards the final paper, just offering school districts, communities more increase in tech access, asynchronous materials, supporting and investing in more in digital literacy, and providing more quiet study spaces. And in conclusion, that is mainly what I've done within the second milestone. Collected clean data, created bar charts, visualizations, started on the further data analysis. So as mentioned, like further going into regression and chi-square analysis. And really, this is a wrap onto my second milestone. So I really hope that you've enjoyed my presentation so far, and thank you so much for listening, and I really look forward to your feedback and any questions that you may have regarding my research. Thank you so much.